Anyone who's watched me over the years knows that I'm obsessed with Hydrolyte. In my opinion, the best oral rehydration product on the market. I literally use it every day. My family uses it. When I had COVID, I'm telling you, Hydrolyte contributed to my recovery, kept me hydrated. Now, with things finally reopening back around the country, the potential exposure to the common cold is always around. And like always, Hydrolyte has got your back. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity, my new favorite, starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of great ingredients. Plus, each single serving easy pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 300 milligrams of elderberry extract. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy to pour sticks that rapidly dissolve in water, make a great tasting drink, has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all natural flavors, gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and even vegan. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity is also now available in ready-to-drink bottles at the Walmart next to the pharmacy. Or as always, you can find it by visiting hydrolyte.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that is HYDRALYTE.com/DRDREW. Be sure to use the code Dr. Drew 25 for a special discount.
Hey everyone, it's a dose of Dr. Drew.
Indeed, here we are, and right next to me, I'm watching you all on Restream, by the way, so thank you all for joining us, but next to me on the screen here is Dr. Nicole Saphier. Dr. Sapphire is the medical director of the MSK Monmouth Memorial Sloan Kettering Breast Imaging Center. She's a radiologist and a director there. She released her new book today, Panic Attack, Playing Politics with Science in the Fight Against COVID-19, and I can't wait to get into that conversation with you because what we've just lived through was something uncanny and something I can't even could never have imagined anything like that. She's also a Fox News contributor and has a lot to say. So Dr. Sapphire, welcome to the program.
Thanks. I'm excited to be on.
We like you. We like what you're saying. And I just saw a couple of things you said. I thought I have to talk to her because, because I got to tell you, we in medicine just experienced something, if our eyes were open, that was mortifying the whole way. And if we didn't get caught in the sort of signaling or caving to whatever corporate demands were upon particularly our primary care colleagues, or devolving into political bickering, if you were not one of those things, you're just looking there in amazement that science just completely evaporated, certainly clinical science, evaporated during this extraordinary experience.
Well, and wasn't that interesting? And so, you've been reporting on this during this entire pandemic, as have I, and we have also continued to be working full time. And what I found was that there was a lot of misinformation, obviously, but that normal discord that occurs when you have scientists, researchers, physicians was amplified by the media, by anyone really watching. And all of a sudden it pined people against each other when really that is just the normal discord that we have. I mean, you think you send someone to a doctor, you get one opinion, you say, okay, now go get your second opinion. And when they don't agree, get your third opinion, because it's normal for people to disagree. And so when we had things unfolding so quickly and everyone had different opinions, it wasn't really infighting. It wasn't really the chaos that the media would have you believe it was. That's what's natural. That's what pushed us forward for this whole scientific discovery.
Well, in fact, the way it was sort of described by the media and the mob, who adopted the same sort of position, was one group is lying and the other is towing the line. Right? Well, that's sort of as opposed to, none of that is about science. None of that has anything to do with science.
Neither of them are, of course. Yeah. And that was the biggest thing. Anyone who had a contrarian opinion or who pushed back or even just questioned what the mainstream media or popular opinion was saying was deemed anti-science and promoting conspiracy theories. And I'll tell you, I've had several media outlets who have said that actually about me, with things that I have said that have actually turned out to be true. I mean, I'm still holding my breath waiting on those retractions, but probably aren't going to come.
You'll expire in the time of respiratory failure holding your breath. But so there will be no retractions. There will be no apologies from anyone. That's just the way this whole thing goes. However, there is a certain, I don't know, I guess it feels less anxiety provoking when reality starts to come back into focus again. It seems like, now, I don't want to get into a evocative topic, but it feels like the willingness to talk about the Wuhan lab as a potential source for this virus is reinstituting proper discourse, proper analysis, rather than smoke blowing, which is what the original bat theory was. It was just if you've read that Medium article on the origins of COVID, you'll see that it came from a couple of places only, and there was not really good evidence for it. And then any attempt to look at the source being a lab, which happens, I don't blame the Chinese for that, absolutely cannot discuss. And suddenly we have people going, well, we can't rule it out.
It's only been 15 months later to have
Right.
that conversation.
Right.
And I'll be honest, in my book, there's an entire chapter dedicated on exploring the theories behind the origin, because
Right.
that's what I needed to do. I needed to take the most controversial topics, explain why they're controversial, and then give people the truth, the data that's available, and let them put together, their own opinions. Unfortunately, yes, there were some strange occurrences that happened near the lab during that time in late 2019. It wouldn't be the first time there was an accidental leak
No.
from a lab that
No.
caused a local outbreak or epidemic. It's happened in the past. I
Yeah.
talk about it. So why didn't we explore that? And that was the biggest concern that I had. And yes, I understand when people came out saying, China released it intentionally, it's okay to question certain things, but just as you said, the natural spillover theory, which by and large is the most common thing that happens when it comes to a pandemic, and the fact that you have wet markets there where animals and humans intermingle, of course, you're going to think that's the most probable circumstance. But there are some very strange coincidences in the lab occurring 10 miles down the road, where we know that they're publishing on genetic sequenced coronaviruses most similar to SARS-CoV-2. And again, they publish on the fact that they are doing genetic splicing to make it more virulent and actually have those same mutations that are in SARS-CoV-2. So it's okay to ask those questions.
How dare you? It has nothing to do with it. What are you talking about? That's a complete conspiracy theory, which was an insane sort of attitude, just raising these issues of. I talked to an FBI agent yesterday who said, by the way, scientists shouldn't even be doing these investigations. Investigators should be doing it, and then scientists should be giving information to the investigators, and they should be dispassionately looking at this thing. The thing that got me from the beginning was think about the response the Chinese government had to the outbreak in Wuhan. I mean, just didn't you see images of chlorine tankers spraying water in the streets and all kinds of crazy things that you will not find in an infectious disease or epidemiology textbook? Those don't exist. And to me at the time, it was confusing and it looked excessive, and it looked like one of two things. I'm seeing it more clearly in the rearview mirror, but it looked like either something they had planned to do where they're some sort of untoward release from the lab. It makes sense that they would be exercising or have some sort of emergency plan in place that included nonsensical extreme interventions like trucks with decontamination trucks rolling down the street. Yeah, if this was the government wanting to make sure something didn't get out of the lab, or at least out of the locality of the lab, or they kind of had this backup plan and they needed to hide what had happened. Those are the only two things that look possible to me based on their behavior.
But they were also being done under cloak and dagger circumstances.
Yeah.
They did the sanitation of the wet market in the middle of the night. And they did this before the investigation by the WHO was even allowed to come in. So, but then they kept changing their tune. They said there was no evidence that the virus was there. But then they came back and it found out, well, actually, they had already sanitized it before the investigation. So then they said they were not able to pull any samples. So again, it's like, which is it? And by the way, when you have a virus, which we now know can aerosolize, the chlorine on the streets, not really going to be that helpful.
Exactly. But what bothered me was here was this government policy, not a physician-driven medical intervention, whether non-pharmacological or otherwise. This was clearly no physicians consulted on this. This was some sort of government intervention that the press in this country started demanding that we adopt. That was the point in this pandemic that got me the most disturbed, when it was being taken away from our profession, which it should have been the CDC. whatever you say about Dr. Fauci, we should have been listening to him. He should have been the leader that we listened to, or at least somebody from the CDC, Walensky, whoever you want. It shouldn't have been governors. You know what I mean? That was the part that I found most distressing. Or if it is governors, it should have been at the absolute behest of the infectious disease community.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, we can say that about China, that the Chinese government were the ones that took over and they were suppressing the whistleblower physicians and the other healthcare workers. But then we kind of did the same thing when we came here into the United States. All of a sudden, we weren't leading with our public health officials, and we were allowing our governors and our mayors to actually make these restrictions and these mandates that were based on very little information. And yes, I understand in the beginning, we were all scared. Hospitals were overflowing, certainly here in New York. I mean, we were in a time of crisis.
Yeah, it was rough.
But immediately we had information within a month, within a couple of months, that we could have utilized much better to start rolling back certain restrictions to make sure that we were tunneling them to be the most beneficial instead of having this blanket process, which we now know is going to cause more harm.
Right. Not just beneficial, but how about a risk reward analysis? I mean, every decision you make, every decision I make, we've been trained for a decade or more to always do no harm and to consider the risk reward analysis in every intervention we make. That didn't seem to be on the table anywhere. This weird one death is too many ethos kicked in. And I thought, again, that was sort of the next stage of the pandemic that troubled me, which was one death is too many. Well, then we're not in a pandemic because pandemics suck. Pandemics are brutal. Pandemics kill people no matter what, or it's not a pandemic.
Well, and somehow we have learned to live with the fact that over 800 people die every day in a car crash, yet we still have cars on the road. We have 200 to 300 flu deaths per day during a bad flu season. RSV puts 50,000 children into the hospital every single year. Now, I'm not comparing SARS-CoV-2 to these other viruses. You know this just like I do. Yeah. SARS-CoV-2 is a very tricky virus. Yeah. And, I don't wish it on anybody. And I think we're going to learn a lot more about the neurotropism as time goes on with the virus. Yeah. However, the point is what we were trying to do was get this virus under control, not to zero cases, not to zero deaths, but to get to the point where we're at an acceptable level of risk that we have deemed acceptable previously with other pathogens and with other causes of death.
But by the way, which are still with us, all of those. I mean, tuberculosis is alive. I mean, everything's still with us. It's not
there are more active cases of TB where you live than COVID right now.
Absolutely. It's not like we were not biological and became biological during the pandemic, and now we're no longer biological, which is kind of the psychology that took hold. By the way, as far as the neurological effects of this disease, I think you're absolutely right. My sneaking suspicion, having had a long hauler syndrome and it being very prominently neurological, I think we're going to find this is a microangiopathic process. I
can tell you. Yeah. So my husband's an endovascular neurosurgeon, and I can tell you in terms of strokes and subarachnoid hemorrhages, brain bleeds, there's definitely some complications with COVID-19. And that was the big thing that concerned me. People were joking around, I can't smell. I lost my sense of taste. And I'm like, you do know that means your central nervous system's involved, right? That's not something to be jovial about or joke about.
And I will tell you, I've read some literature that did show pathological specimen evidence of microangiopathy in the first cranial nerve in one, which is maybe the cause of the lack of smell. And then I got this horrible ringing, actually in this ear. So it just makes sense to me that the cranial nerves were, and we had, and the vaccines caused a seventh cranial nerve problem. There's something going on with the cranial nerves. And I'm suspicious. Like they've also found megakaryocytes in the small vasculature of the brain. So what are they doing there? You know what I mean? So there's some platelet, endothelial, small vessel, something going on with this virus. Well, I remember the Johnson & Johnson reaction was sort of showing some of the same stuff.
Well, and also think about that when people were going into, it wasn't necessarily the virus that was causing issues. It was the inflammatory response to the virus, which was causing so many people to not do well in the hospital. So as, and now that they're reporting some myocarditis cases following vaccine, we're seeing it with the virus, is there going to be an autoimmune effect from this virus? It's possible. We've seen it with other pathogens. This virus is tricky. I do not take it lightly. And so, but I am happy to announce I officially declare the emergency is over. We have done an incredible job.
Okay, hold on, slow down, everybody. Dr. Sapphire says it's over. It's let's see, it's fine.
The pandemic's not over, but the emergency is, and we have to move forward.
I'm not sure the pandemic is defined by excess death. I don't think we're having excess death anymore. Now, it doesn't mean the virus has been eradicated, but I don't think we're in a territory of excess death. So Dr. Sapphire says at 6:36 Pacific time on May 25th, we're done. That's it. And yet, in the meantime, by the way, in the state of California, we're still relatively locked down with wearing masks until June 15th, when arbitrarily things end. Magically, things end on June 15th. So,
well, I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal, and I said Memorial Day should be known as the day of emancipation, and it's time for that to happen. And we're so close. It's just like, come on, people, emancipate us.
I'm writing it down. I wrote it down too. Emancipation. I like that. So back to where we got into trouble with this whole thing. It feels like, well, first of all, Dr. Bhattacharya had pointed out to me a really interesting construct, which was that the priorities of public health and the priority of science were sort of conflated. And the priorities of public health in terms of giving unified information to people so there's a unified understanding and unified messaging, first of all, became like a battling, a battle axe. It was not what it usually had been, which was narratives and humor and bringing people to understanding the consequences of actions. This was now from on high mandates, and it bled over into science, which is normally about questioning everything. You weren't allowed to question anything no matter what.
No, and this is the politicization of science. Unfortunately, you saw a knee-jerk anti-Trumpism, and when he would mention certain things, immediately you had half of the country wanting to prove him wrong. And as we saw specifically with hydroxychloroquine, this actually invaded some of our academic research with fraudulent data requiring articles to have to be pulled. I mean, to me, that was extremely appalling. And it's time of crisis. Yes, we want to rush and try and get out as much data as possible. But again, science is the quest to prove or disprove something. There should be no political motivation. There should be no partisan side to it. And it really should be completely separate from some of those public health recommendations. Public health is to the greater good of society. Again, it's not about the individual, whereas the scientists need to just be looking at the science. And that really did not happen here.
And I would argue that I'm not sure they served the greater good because they didn't consider the consequences of their interventions.
I said supposed to.
Okay, fair enough. I love the name of your book. I mean, because that characterizes my sense of what we have just been through. And I'm not saying that we're all individually experiencing panic attacks. This whole thing has been a giant panic, and it has been generated by the mob on social media and the media, so-called traditional media, and they don't seem to be acknowledging what happened.
No, and they're still doing those panic inciting headlines that you talk about breakthrough cases. Bill Maher tested positive after vaccination. We're shutting down the show. It's like, well, why are we testing? Why are we doing prevalence studies for those who are already vaccinated? Right. And so now you get the hype again. Well, okay, now you can still test positive after being vaccinated. I guess we need to live in a perpetual state of lockdown forever, regardless of the cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. And I'll tell you, when I was researching for this book, I was shocked to see how many people actually wanted that to continue with restrictions, despite the fact that we are now at record low numbers of cases and deaths. I mean, California right now, I think you guys are below where you were in the beginning of April. And that was even before we could test for the virus. So we're probably much lower now than we were back then.
We're quite low. And again, who knows what we're actually measuring, because the hospitalization and death rate is way down. We may be picking up, again, that you can get infected with this virus. And I saw another headline, 10,000 breakthroughs of 150. Thank you. 10,000 breakthroughs. This was in a online medical journal. And I thought, that's of 150 million vaccines, that there were only 10,000 breakthroughs, none of them ended in death, is an extraordinary success. Why is the headline 10,000 breakthroughs? Why isn't it There have only been 10,000 out of 150 million.
And somehow that's been okay with the flu. The flu shots range, their efficacies are like, what, 40 to 60% every year with a lot of breakthrough infections. But the good news is when you get the flu shot, if you get the flu, there's a good chance it's not going to be as severe.
Right.
Same thing with the COVID vaccine. We have to get away from that perceived level of risk and actually get to reality. And that's really been poor messaging on the CDC and other people's part.
Yes. Well, I saw somewhere some data that some people that, watch certain news outlets believe that the fatality rate if you get COVID is 50%, which is, I mean, if you're 90, it might be 20% or 30%, but even then, I'm not even sure it's that high. And if you're, if you're 16 or you're 30, it's zero. It's zero. Now, not to say that you can't get some unpleasant, as you pointed out, there are going to be some, it really felt like a head injury. It felt like a traumatic brain injury. And that's why I keep thinking about microvasculature. It felt diffused. It felt sort of I've never had a bad concussion, but it's how I imagine a bad concussion would feel. Go ahead.
Well, I did not get COVID, and but I can tell you that from everyone that I've talked to, it is the only way I can describe it is a tricky virus.
Yeah.
I just don't quite understand it fully yet. But I will say though, as we move into, okay, now we have a good amount of the adults with at least one dose of the vaccine. We've moved to young adults to try and decrease the viral transmission. And now we're moving into adolescents. The conversation is going around young children.
Yeah.
Well, as a mother of 3, I have a lot of interest in this conversation. Mm-hmm. And my biggest concern right now is, they are not, Dr. Fauci continues to say, the good news is these vaccines may be available for younger children by the end of the school year, early 2022. And I would just really urge with caution again, that this is not an emergency in young children. Yeah. This is not even an emergency in the country anymore because of such low level of transmission. Should we really be expanding the vaccine under the emergency use authorization for these young children? Because I can tell you, listen, I do research. I'm not the best statistician, but the studies are not powered to even decide if the vaccine itself is going to induce MIS-C in children, which is the biggest concern we have with the virus in young children.
Yeah.
So wouldn't we want to make sure that the vaccine doesn't do it?
I'm out of sync. What's MIS-C?
Go ahead. The inflammatory.
Multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. So this is actually the rising concern when it comes to kids. Kids are not really being hospitalized very much with the virus. They're not dying of the virus, but there are increasing cases of this MIS-C, which is kind of like an autoimmune condition that develops about 2 to 4 weeks after infection. And it could have been asymptomatic infection, and it's happening in healthy children. Mm. And while most children don't die from this, it can be quite debilitating, leading to hospitalization and some long-term consequences.
We used to call it Kawasaki, right?
Yeah, very similar to Kawasaki, which again, a lot of cases of Kawasaki every year, or not a lot, but comparable to what's happening with MIS-C. And yet we haven't shut things down to avoid Kawasaki disease, which is another post-viral syndrome.
Not only that, in addition to primary care doctors sort of getting frozen in place, I've never seen anything like this, where they refuse to use their brain. They refuse to improvise on behalf of their patients. To me, it was a very eye-opening experience, and to realize that most primary physicians are under the iron fist of corporations that are telling them what their clinical pathway is. My thing is, well, why do you need us then? Just do nurse practitioners and physician assistants. You don't need us. If we're not able to use our judgment and training to improvise what the best thing for that particular patient is, forget it. We're not needed.
No, first of all, do not even get me started with the shutdown of elective procedures at the beginning of all of this. Mm-hmm. As someone who's married to a brain surgeon who does nothing really elective, it's all strokes, brain aneurysms, and all of that. I can tell you that people died because of those decisions being made by government officials and hospital administrators who have never actually treated patients.
Of course not.
Myself, as someone who, my entire daily goal is to diagnose cancer at its earliest possible stage so we can treat it and we can prolong life, was immediately shut down, not by the institution, but people were more afraid of COVID than cancer, and they weren't coming for these appointments. And we're already seeing the consequences of that. And within the next few years, we're going to have a lot of data on how many people ended up dying because they didn't come in.
100%. And that doesn't even begin to measure all the mental health consequences, which we're going to be dealing with for many, many years to come. But I will tell you, in addition to being frozen in place, primary care physicians also stopped thinking. I saw a case of Kawasaki where this kid was hospitalized, and he shows his hand lesions. We have major outbreaks of tick-borne disease here in Southern California, major, that I'm blanking on the one that Douglas had, Susan. This is how COVID has left me. Typhus. Typhus is endemic and common, and especially during the summer month. And he held up his hands to show the so-called Kawasaki rash. It was a typhus rash. He absolutely had typhus. It must be COVID. It must be COVID. He had typhus. And I was thinking, the kid was like 15. I thought, oh my God, he's got typhus. He doesn't have Kawasaki or the multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And I thought, oh my God, they've just stopped thinking. Everything that looks and smells like COVID is COVID without any other thought or consideration.
Well, I mean, of course. I mean, that was that's still being played out, and unfortunately, that's why you're also seeing muddying of the data too. Specifically, what just came out of California, the childhood hospitalizations, because we are now universally just testing people that come into the hospital. You had about 46% of the kids who were listed as COVID hospitalizations were really just there because they had a broken leg, they had appendicitis, they had a mental health issue, but they were listed as a COVID hospitalization. So even the perceived low risk for children is even lower. That's exactly true. I want to go back to the panic attack part of this. Again, read the book, Panic Attack. Get it now. It's available on Amazon and everywhere else you get books. It looks, I even love the graphs on the front page. It's perfect. The epidemiology graphs. I wasn't sure if that was kind of just showing myself as a little bit nerdy with those graphs. No. I personally loved that graph. I love that graph too. And everyone has seen, if not that graph, graphs like that during this whole thing. And a lot of preoccupation with epidemiology, I would say, during this thing. And I'm thinking back now, again, this is all sort of now coming into focus through the rearview mirror. Back to April. Is it April? Yeah, it's April of 2019. Well, 2019. Yeah. When did this all start? Like spring of 2019. January, right? 2020. Yeah. 20. Okay. We had January 2020 is where it got bad. The lockdown was March, right? Well, January 2021 is where it got bad. So back to April 2020. Let's put it this way. During the outbreak in Italy, okay, I started hearing for the first time out of the mouth of almost every journalist on television, almost every shift they were on the air, the words grim and staggering. Two words I'd never heard on television before. Like, this is a grim milestone. That was the other thing. Grim milestone. Italy has 500 dead or something. This is a grim milestone. The numbers are staggering. And I thought at the beginning of this pandemic, this is a pandemic. If this is the staggering numbers, we're going to get into some, I don't know how you're going to be describing them. You're going to run out of adjectives. Yeah, but they stayed with grim and staggering because those achieved the goal of panic, right? They fell in love with those words. And you mentioned earlier how the headlines shouldn't have been so disgustingly panic-inducing. And I would argue that these two words are the ones that are sort of the flagship words for this entire experience. And I got tired of hearing them. I early on, I started screaming about it, saying, stop it, shut up, stop, just listen to the CDC. I'd not heard who was the director of the Redford, what was his name? Redfield. I didn't hear him say staggering. I didn't hear him say grim. Trust me, if it were grim, he'd use the word grim. I mean, for you and me, grim would be, look, AIDS was a grim outbreak. It had a 100% fatality rate associated. It was grim if you got it, 100%, no questions asked. When I saw those patients and they came in with their first episode of pneumocystis pneumonia, I would say, you have 6 months to live, and I was never wrong. It was grim. That was grim. 100% fatality. This was awful and sucked.
I think it's time for...
Oh, you're striking back again. Okay. Thank you for leaving the Panic Attack up there, the book. Yeah, I like that.
Well, I do want to say, but fast forward though to the new CDC director, when we already had millions of doses of the vaccine out, and we have come off the winter. And what did she say?
She has
there's going to be
feeling.
impending doom.
Impending doom. I hope.
Why is our CDC director saying that? Did she not follow the numbers? Like, things are great.
Not only that, when people behave in ways that I would hate to see somebody act at the head of a bed if they have a sick patient in the bed. And you wouldn't have the family there and go, I have a terrible feeling. I'm feeling impending doom. You would never say shit like that.
Oh, this is bad. This is bad. You know what? I don't even know what I'm doing here. I can't help you. Just walk out of the room.
This is doom. I got to run. I got to go. It really was an insane thing for somebody to say. It made me think that she's never practiced medicine in the real world. It made me, has she? I don't know.
You know, I think she has up in Boston. And, you know, I'll tell you, she actually has a very, very respected person in the field.
Her training is good. Her training
Well,
is
listen,
good,
you know why I know she's smart? Because last summer, when the mayor of her town asked her about children wearing masks in school and the distancing, she said in an email, you know what, 6 feet, that's not really necessary. 3 feet's going to be okay.
Good
but then
for
what did the CDC guidelines say once she took over? Oh, you have to have 6 feet. Because you know why? Because if they're 6 feet, schools can't open.
Oh, perfect. Well, it did look like their physicians were behaving in a very political sort of way through much of this pandemic. And do you think...
Well, you get canceled if you do anything.
Well, I think they were afraid. And we don't really know what pressures they were under from the various administrations they were serving, but they were saying things that seemed odd and sort of. The other thing Walensky did, I don't know if you caught this, she goes, you know, my son looks forward to nothing more than going
summer
to
camps.
First of all, if you know any 16-year-old males, that's not exactly what they're thinking about, but okay, I'll give you that. I understand.
I have a 21-year-old son.
So
I have 3 boys. I get it.
Okay, yeah. So he's not. He may like summer camp, but if there's somebody there he likes, that's what he likes about summer camp. But okay.
And the mask isn't going to do anything.
Right. And so she's like, oh, he's like pulling beans out of a jar, waiting for the day to come when he can go to summer camp again. And then she goes, but he's not going. And now you need to vaccinate your kids, and they can keep distance and blah blah blah. And she gives all these guidelines. My kid's not going. Did you read anything else into my kid's not going? Because I saw something very clear.
I think she was saying she's not letting her children out until they get vaccinated.
I think she's saying I'm not going to let my kids get vaccinated. I think that's what she's saying. I don't think she didn't realize she was saying that, but that's what she was saying. Because
wouldn't that be interesting to know?
It would be interesting to know, and I would like her to put her
money where her mouth is.
Well, that's not really what I mean, but yeah, I would like her to walk the walk as well as talk the talk and get your kids vaccinated if that's what you want other people to do. But I saw in that comment, not my kid. I'm not sure yet. And
would you get our kids vaccinated if they were younger?
You know,
if they were like under 12 or 12 or 13.
No. Mm-mm. But
so I can say, so I have a 21-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
My 21-year-old made a decision on his own. He went and got the Pfizer. He teaches skateboarding to autistic children over the summer.
Good for him.
And that was his decision to protect the children.
Yep.
When it comes to my younger kids, unless they power those studies to really prove a risk benefit to me, I'm not there.
That's right. I'm with you on that. And I would, no, I wouldn't. For a 16 to 20-year-old, I would leave it. I would involve the kids in the decision. I would.
I think the school would probably.
It would take a lot of things into account, like what the kids wanted to be doing and stuff like that.
We went to a pretty snooty prep school, so they probably would have to.
Probably.
If they wanted to.
Well, colleges are, a lot of colleges are requiring it. And I just don't think you should require vaccination when it's still under an emergency use. Yeah. How can you do that?
It's interesting. I'm a vaccine enthusiast. I can't get enough vaccines for myself and my family generally. That's just generally my position. But I do like to see a little track record. Like when they were kids, I didn't let them get the chickenpox vaccine because at that point it was about a 2-year-old vaccine. I was like,
I should have gotten it though.
I'd like to see a little more time before I know for sure. Now I would absolutely get the chickenpox vaccine.
I got chickenpox.
Yep, you did. But hang on, Susan. You
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I lost my. COVID has left me with these strange blocks
Now,
that I get
whenever I
periodically.
speak, I just stop his brain.
Well, I guess you've always been able to do that, but now especially since COVID. What was I talking about? Vaccines and so 16 to 20-year-olds. I would be ambivalent about it. What I will tell you is, so I got the illness. I'm doing a very fancy antibody screen and memory B cell sort of screen, and my immunology is way off the chart. I'm like a crazy high levels of all of it. 30% of people retain at least the humoral immunity in the studies that are being done, and I'm luckily one of those people. But we're going out of the country in about a month or so, and I can't leave without taking a vaccine. So I took Johnson & Johnson, got sick as hell, but I'm fine. I'm fine to take it. But I did have a really curious. Your husband would love this side effect I got. I woke up on day 2 or day 3. Susan, was it day 2 or day 3? It was somewhere not in the middle of the.
You forgot what day it was.
Acute
That's
reaction.
How bad it was.
I woke up with a spontaneous black eye.
Oh, this is after the
with a raccoon's eye, and
I think I got him with his.
You didn't,
my
Susan.
elbow.
It was we now we know there's a lot.
We really
going on.
know what happened.
Right. So, well, you can call the social services. That's okay. I'll blink SOS.
I may have rolled over and just got him.
All right, but here's the deal.
Eye, but whatever happened.
What your husband will tell you is that spontaneous ecchymosis around the eye can be a presenting feature of transverse sinus thrombosis.
Mm-hmm.
And now, thankfully, there were none of that in males.
I wasn't responsible for that.
And I didn't have headache.
There were in other countries though.
Oh, were there? Fascinating.
Really?
And I had no headache. I had no vision changes. I had nothing else.
You just looked really silly.
It seemed to have passed, but isn't that interesting, right?
It is interesting.
Yeah.
And I had just had my eyes lifted, so he thought he was just having sympathy
and
bruising in his eye.
And that was how many weeks ago was that? 3 weeks ago?
That was 6 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago.
Listen, when it comes to immunize or giving the vaccine to our adolescents, we know that adolescent and young adult immunobiology are nearly identical. And so when, people are having a lot of questions, do we vaccinate the adolescents? This again, for me, we vaccinated the older population to save the most lives, keep people out of the hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
You do move to the younger populations to decrease the risk, the level of transmission, because we don't want any more variants to pop up that are going to start escaping immunity.
Absolutely.
So we have to keep this transmission down.
Yeah.
But with that, the younger and younger we get, I think it should be more on a case-by-case basis. I think that it's a good conversation to have with the child if they're old enough, and also their pediatrician.
Yep, I completely agree with all that. So in our household, I got sick. I took the vaccine, had a wild reaction. Another son had a bad reaction to Pfizer. He still needs the second vaccine.
No, he had Moderna.
He still needs the second vaccine. Susan had...
No, that was the second one.
Oh, was that the second one that he
the
reacted
second
to?
one kicked his butt.
Okay, good. So that's over.
I felt nothing.
Susan, 0, except a little sleepiness.
I was tired.
Our daughter had it, no reaction.
Our 80-year-old housekeeper said, I feel nothing.
Yep, we got her vaccinated. But my
Polish.
other son, we have triplets. The other son, they're all 28. And he had COVID, sick for 4 days, and then pissed. Like I quarantined for that, and he's not taking the vaccine. He's refusing to take it, and that's a reasonable thing for him to do.
He doesn't need it yet.
It's reasonable.
And that's the thing. All of a sudden, you've turned Senator Rand Paul against Dr. Fauci, both physicians, both who make very valid arguments when they're having a conversation, yet they don't acknowledge the other's argument. And if they just did, people could actually understand it a little bit more. And it has been interesting to me throughout the last 6 months that anyone who gives any credence to natural immunity or just acknowledges that it exists is deemed anti-vax. But the truth is, you can acknowledge natural immunity is present. We have a lot of data showing it's actually quite strong, and reinfection rates are very low. And that doesn't mean you're anti-vax.
Yep, that's me. I've talked about my immunity before I got vaccinated. I've been vaccinated. Most people in my family have been vaccinated, and we were kicked off YouTube for even talking about my immunity. Yeah, we went into YouTube jail for. I was talking about how I'd had my immunity checked. I had this broad antibody profile done, and again, I was way up with my antibody response, and that got me kicked off YouTube. Interesting, right?
It is.
Which is a whole other story. I'm imagining you address in the book, which is censorship.
Oh, yes, that is certainly a topic addressed, and how it played out throughout the entire course of the pandemic,
Talk
not
about
just
it.
on a couple of instances.
Tell me about it. Tell me a little bit, not without giving too much away. We want you to read the book.
You know, I honestly, hydroxychloroquine, in my opinion, was one of the biggest examples, the most obvious example, and how that played out was, I found it was disgusting what happened with that.
Disgusting.
You know, we had this old medication that's cheap, that actually has known antiviral properties that was effective against the original SARS coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
So is it so crazy to think that people, when we had a novel coronavirus with no known treatments, that we were going to throw the sink at them and say, hey, we're just going to do anything possible, that they would choose this old cheap medication that's being given to millions of people across the globe? Of course not. And even China came out with a very small study, which, yes, it was ripped apart by people, but showing that people who were taking hydroxychloroquine because of an autoimmune disease had a lower rate of hospitalization. Now, does that really mean that it did anything? Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, because you had those early information, people started talking about it. And, you know, President Trump, he always was getting briefed by scientists and doctors, and he just liked to tell the public everything that he was told. And I'm not sure if the politician should do that, because we saw what happened.
Yes. Well, certainly he shouldn't have done that, because people react to everything he says so strongly. But I agree on the hydroxychloroquine. In fact, I was doing, internists, we do this thing called the MKSAP, which is this ongoing continuing medical education testing. I just do it every 3 years. And it's sort of a board prep course kind of thing. And I was stunned in my rheumatology section. They pointed out that they asked a question about continuing hydroxychloroquine during pregnancy. And yes, if you have a lupus patient, you're supposed to keep them on hydroxychloroquine during pregnancy because it's so safe. It's the only medicine I can think of that is actually actively recommended to continue during pregnancy.
Yeah, they don't tell you to take Tylenol.
No,
they keep saying
give patients I don't give them anything. I try to keep there's occasionally some psychiatric meds that you'll say, oh, this is risky, but I think it's worth the risk reward analysis, diathesis. Sure. But in this case, there's no risk. They're saying just stay on it, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and then think about what happened. So you have these reports all across the world. You have physicians giving hydroxychloroquine all across the world. We didn't have time for randomized controlled trials. We're just trying to save lives and keep people out of the hospital.
That's right.
But what happened all of a sudden, because President Trump decided to mention that it may work, all of a sudden you had governors and pharmaceutical boards telling physicians, oh, by the way, you're not allowed to prescribe that. And they were slapping people with warnings and potential fines for doing that. I mean, to me, that was the most gross invasion of the doctor-patient relationship. Yep. That is when you really saw how they were cutting off the physicians, the healthcare workers, just at the knees.
Yep, of all time. Nothing like that has ever happened.
Did you get censored at any point?
Have I been censored in any way?
In the media,
like on social media or anything? Yeah. Did you get stuff?
Down? I have a lot of followers, and I've never been alerted that something I've ever put out has been put down.
Have
mainly
you had
because
any mob attacks upon you?
I like the mute function. It's good for my mental health.
I can say Dr. Zelenko is off Twitter, and everybody, a lot of doctors we've interviewed have been censored for a short period of time.
Well, can I just tell you though? Here's the thing with Dr. Zelenko and the frontline doctors.
Yeah.
And I talk about it in the book.
Yeah.
I talk about them in the book.
Good.
Now, how am I going to word this? Essentially,
okay.
You can't come forth and say something is a cure.
Yeah.
Unless you really have the data to back that up.
I agree.
You can say that you're utilizing something in your own basis, outpatient basis, and you believe that it is working, and you really would hope that we could put together a clinical trial to see if it works.
Yep, I agree.
It's all about messaging. It's about verbiage. And so, whether things should be censored or not, I don't know, but you really have to be careful what you say. And even though I go against the grain, I have, again, given credence to the lab leak theory. I've discussed the controversy of hydroxychloroquine. I have said prolonged lockdowns and face masks just aren't necessary, and we need to take those masks off kids. I'm not censored because nothing I say isn't backed completely by facts. I'm criticized.
I wish scientific sort of defense was adequate to fight. Because believe me, when you're censored, there's no recourse. And it's very capricious, very random. They're doing the same thing with fluvoxamine right now on a lower level.
Are they really?
Yeah, there are certain pharmacies in certain states aren't allowing it to be prescribed. And this thing.
Oh, that's right. Joe told me that you can't get it in New York.
It got me out of my long hauler syndrome. I don't know what I would have done without it. I mean, it clearly worked with me. Within 30 minutes of my first dose, the tinnitus in my right ear diminished or went away for a while. Yeah, it was really kind of striking for me. It doesn't work for everybody. This is not a panacea. None of these things are.
But you took it like 2 weeks in.
Yeah. I took it for 2 weeks.
But you were already like 10 days it was after you could go out into public again.
Yes.
So you didn't take it at the beginning.
No. I kind of wish I had, though, in retrospect.
I know.
You were trying to say something. That's Sapphire.
I don't remember what I was trying to say, except
good.
that I find it frustrating that we still don't have a silver bullet to treat COVID-19 or long haul syndrome.
Yes.
And when people are finding that things are working, that they are not being investigated and rather they're being restricted.
There is some good evidence now that at least some of the long hauler sufferers have continued viral production that is hidden from the immune system. It's within certain macrophages. There's now some good evidence for that. So we should be. So as I look forward, have you seen that Merck product that's anti-RNA virus, antiviral?
Mm-hmm.
That may be a really definitive treatment for long hauler. And I do think it'll also be a very important treatment for COVID. But with that and the vaccine, I mean, we have this thing in hand at that point.
Right. And we've also very much tweaked ventilator protocols, oxygenation levels. I mean, it's very different now than it was a year ago. And, there's multifactorial while more people are surviving. But with the vaccine and, as you mentioned, the antiviral medication, I agree. I do not see us getting back to a level of impending doom.
No, not at all. In fact, the data that keeps coming in on the variants, the vaccines just continue to perform. And some of it is from cellular immunity, not just humoral immunity as well. So, absolutely. Susan, were you trying to say something?
No, I just think that doctors have gotten it under control. I think that the medical world has come together.
Well, it's an interesting question. Why doesn't the United States get some credit for saving the world, essentially?
I actually wrote an opinion piece when President Biden said, we're going to give away these intellectual property rights. That's what we're going to do on these vaccines. I'm like, time out. Let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
Yes, I know Operation Warp Speed in itself is controversial, but wasn't that one of the most brilliant moves at the very beginning of this pandemic?
It saved the world. And let's get Germany in here with us. I mean, BioNTech was a really key part of the game.
Of course,
and so
absolutely.
Germany, United States, there are some other vaccines around, and China has a vaccine in Russia. Nothing like our vaccines. Nothing. Right. We literally saved the world from catastrophe, or from we don't even know what. And so
coronavirus vaccine research has been going on for decades. It always lacked the funding. And then all of a sudden you had President Trump saying, okay, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
I trust you. I trust you to put some stuff together. We're going to manufacture it while you're doing that because I really trust you're going to come up with something.
Yeah.
And when they did, it was ready to go. It's incredible.
Yep. And let's see, Cheapo brand fruit punch. Let me repeat Dr. Saphier's qualifications as the director at Memorial Sloan Kettering Breast Cancer Imaging Center. And it's the Breast Cancer Center, not just the Imaging Center. Is that correct?
No. So Memorial Sloan Kettering is obviously I'm not speaking on behalf of Memorial Sloan Kettering.
Yes, but that's your mother institute.
It's my mothership. So I'm the director of breast imaging at one of the regional sites where we do all of the imaging, we do the localizations for surgeries, we do surgeries, radiation, all of the above.
We're looking at a restream chat here. I just want to make sure that I'm getting everybody's point of view here. Leopold, I see that you still have long hauler syndrome. You should be working with Dr. Patterson and Dr. Yo. They are getting some progress with things. But I do see you, Leopold. I'm sorry about that. That sucks.
What happened?
Leopold still has long hauler syndrome.
Does he really?
Bad,
Oh my God.
Let's see. Hang on a second. Cheap bro brand. What claim are you talking about with that? What evidence are we talking about? So,
just ignore it.
By the way, I love that people keep saying, "Oh, she's a radiologist." That's funny. Like, I do a lot of training.
Yeah,
to be a radiologist.
Yeah,
I
to be a
know, when you
radiologist.
And then my fellowship.
When you get
Yeah.
cancer and you need a radiologist,
Yeah,
then you won't be
trust me,
laughing.
radiologists are. Well, when I was in training, radiology is one of the very hot, particularly interventional radiology, things like that, the very hot fields, and it really always stayed there. So it tends to attract the best and the brightest. That's for
I mean,
sure.
I personally like what I do.
Yeah.
Well, we're very happy that you do it.
Thank you.
I thought I saw some other interesting
But
questions.
you're
in
also
the stream.
great on TV, just so you know.
Susan's
Oh,
a fan.
thank you.
Yes.
That's nice.
Yes. Somebody said you're hot, so
And
you
by
got,
the way,
you got that too.
Susan does not. Susan does not give out compliments easily. By
Drew
the
only
way.
sees the bad compliments. I'm seeing lots of good compliments.
Good.
So don't
No-
worry. Don't worry.
Okay. So
It's there's a one against about 250
it's fine.
here.
It's fine. I just want to address these things. So here's. Andrew Ashkazvili asked a good question. Why is it that 50% of the CDC and 50% of the NIH employees aren't taking the vaccine? Be fair, Andrew, when you say employees of the CDC and NIH, it's a massive bureaucracy. I'm doubting that you're taking the scientists and the clinicians, I'm sure, are taking it. I mean, we can look at the data and judge for ourselves, and this is a safe thing. But let me get back to some of the other sort of banter I saw here on the stream, which essentially I think I can distill down to kind of one question, which is that so much of what happened in terms of where this thing spiraled and the panic attack that ensued and the way the press behaves and the governor's bizarre mandates, was this all, can we trace it all back essentially to Trump derangement syndrome? Is it, because it kind of feels like it all kind of trickles back to that.
I think it's on my back cover or my cover jacket of the book that I said, listen, this is a catastrophe. There's a failure of, on many levels of the response internationally and even domestically, but the knee-jerk anti-Trumpism made everything so much worse. And I truly think that has caused as much damage to our country as the virus.
And if we say that so much of the excesses that weren't contemplated from the standpoint of risk-reward analysis, they were just knee-jerk political responses against what that particular president was saying. And as you pointed out early, he didn't do himself any favors with some of the stuff he threw out there. But that it does seem like there was already kind of a panic in the air around Trump, and then this sent it into some sort of hyperspace.
No, of course. It's not like we just started having this division as soon as the virus came.
But I didn't realize it was such a panic. You know what I mean? It really, when you look at it all Trump derangement looks like a panic disorder now, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, honestly, I think that the mental health has been affected on every single person, and not just because of lockdowns, but because of the media, because what we're hearing and the verbiage being used, and the fact that you still have some people not willing to take off masks, despite the fact that they're vaccinated, despite the fact they're walking outside and the community transmission level is at an all-time low. That's a problem.
Well, that is approaching delusional, right? I mean, at a certain level, panic becomes delusional. And I'm seeing delusional thinking for sure.
I certainly think that there is the perceived level of risk is not reality. And until they actually have their so-called white knight leaders, a la whether it's the CDC, whether it's President Biden, come out and say the emergency is over, it's time to take off your mask, they're not going to. But unfortunately, you still see the CDC saying children need to be playing outdoors 6 feet apart in summer camps wearing masks.
That's crazy.
What science is that based on?
None, zero. That's the point. That none of the public health policies could be defended from the standpoint of any given science. And there should be, one thing we should learn from this pandemic is that in the future, if people's freedoms are going to be encumbered, it has to be with good evidence. You have to have some evidence, as opposed to none. It's just I just like this as an intervention.
What does Dr. Fauci say? It's my gut feeling.
Gut feeling is not good. That is not. It was also Walensky's gut feeling that we would have some impending doom ahead.
There's a big somebody in caps.
Sycophantic media is to blame for reality distortion. Well, and big tech censorship. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's funny. I have a book you may want to read if that's how you feel.
It's called Panic Attack. Check it out, man. Check it out. but I was
Thank
gonna
you, crazy mook.
But I was gonna say that I feel like that there's been panic for a long time, and somehow we've had almost a personality shift where we've become histrionic. At least the sort of public mind is more histrionic than it has been in my lifetime. And I've said this before, that if 5 years ago you came to me and started talking about seeing Nazis everywhere and then believing that the president was a Russian operative, I would put you in the hospital. That's what would have happened. I would have said, I'm sorry, this is delusional thinking. Preoccupations with Nazis, this is classic delusional thinking. That would have ended up with a hospitalization. And now it's, New York Times editorial board discourse. Doesn't it catch you off as something very strange?
Absolutely. And, that is, my husband likes to joke about that all the time, to be honest. And he's like, just because they think that the virus is going to be every single place around there doesn't mean that we have to live in that same fantasy world that they are in.
And to his point, if you're going to not get vaccinated,
that's on you.
That's on you. Then you go keep wearing the mask. But I don't need to keep wearing the mask then. You need to be protecting yourself because you've chosen to move around the world that way. Why would I want to keep wearing a mask? I'm not going to be transmissible. I've had the vaccine. I don't transmit the virus. So yes, you can catch it because you've not had the vaccine. If you want to keep wearing a mask, fine. But should the rest of us have to? What do you think?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
She was always bragging.
Emancipation. We've already talked about it.
Yes.
All right. So bottom line, get the book.
We need another.
No more strikes back.
Emancipation is on the way.
You need Dr.
Look at that.
Nicole.
Look
Dr.
at
Nicole
Emancipation Day is on Memorial Day.
She's put it in there. I like how you spelled it.
Did I spell it wrong?
No, I think it's a good spelling.
I don't actually think there's a correct spelling.
It looks like constipation, but
no, that's really funny. All right. Well, listen, I've kept you long enough. I love the book. I can't wait to get into it. It's such a relief to hear colleagues looking back in the rearview mirror and going, what the hell was this? This wasn't okay. There was nothing good about this. And I think you were kind of like me. You experienced it in real time, but it was very confusing and you couldn't really speak out very clearly because you'd get absolutely smacked down. Maybe you did. Have you been able to say things as clearly as you do now during the pandemic?
I feel like I walked on a tightrope.
You had to be careful.
One, because we don't necessarily know what was going on. Information was changing.
That's right.
But I can tell you right now, as all of this Wuhan information is coming out, I've already called out on CNN, Esquire, and Vox, and everyone who said that the fact that I'm even mentioning the lab theory is just wrong, and I've just been completely discredited by the experts.
And let's be 100% clear on this. There's no evidence that talking about a lab in another country that has to be called China contributes to anti-Asian hate. It just does. It does no evidence for that. And we are certainly it's even to have to say this is ridiculous. We are 1,000%. None of that is okay, and none of that should generate any anti-American sentiment for people whose ancestors happen to have come from a communist country. That's insanity, everybody. So, and anti-Asian sentiment had been around for a long time in certain communities and things. I will take you back to the Rodney King's riots here in Los Angeles when the Korean American community was so attacked at the time. So anyway, we're going to leave it at this. Is there more to be said?
She's on Eastern time.
Yeah, I want to let her go. I know she has kids to put to bed and stuff too. So we've said it all.
I have myself to put to bed.
All right, I hear you.
They're already asleep.
All right, Dr. Nicole Saphier.
God bless you.
Go to Nicole Saphier.
Thank you for making Drew feel better.
Sapphire is spelled Saphier, as Nicole Saphier, MD.com. Panic Attack is the book. Let's all go get it and support Dr. Saphier.
To buy the book.
And
I appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much for this conversation.
You got it. And for everyone else, we will see you next time.
Bye.
I've struggled with various digestive issues over the years, so gut health is extremely important to me. Now, while gut health awareness has increased, it has led to a wellness trend that inspired a host of kind of questionable marketing claims and even false claims. You've seen the word probiotic attached to all kinds of supplements, drinks, and more, and they may claim to deliver the healthy microorganisms our guts need for proper function, but all too often the promises are really too good to be true. Thankfully, I became aware of a company called Seed and their flagship product, the Daily Synbiotic. That's right. Seed's Daily Symbiotic offers 24 clinically researched strains of microorganisms in a single dose. These strains support gut, skin, and heart health and promotes regularity, sometimes within as little as 24 to 48 hours. To me, what really sets Seed's Daily Symbiotic apart is its delivery system. This is my supply. While some products may offer the right strains, they are fragile and they rarely survive the trip through your gut. Seed uses a capsule-in-capsule design that helps ensure that 100% of the probiotics reach your colon where they matter most. Now, I've been taking Seed's Daily Symbiotic, and I encourage you to check out their story and the science behind what they do. To try it for yourself, just go to seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew for 20% off your first month of Daily Symbiotic. That is seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code DRDREW, Dr. Drew.
Well, we're back, and I just have one thing to mention. Tomorrow we have a special guest that Dr. Drew was not aware of, and I just want to let you know that your future ex-wife is coming on the show, Angela Deem from 90 Day Fiancé on TLC.
Your new best friend. This is very exciting. So Angela and Susan have been probably texting and talking. And
yes,
Angela,
and she's coming on for 40 minutes. She'll be here at 3 o'clock tomorrow, so we have to be ready.
3 o'clock.
And she's got 40 minutes, and then we will look at her amazing transformation
because she had a bunch of surgery.
Loss.
Yep.
If anybody's a 90 Day Fiancé on TLC fan, be sure to tune in.
Angela is a favorite, and this should be fun. It'll be a very different kind of show, trust me. But
we won't be sharing your COVID story again.
Susan and I got stuck in 90 Day Fiancé thanks to Tom Segura, who directed us into that show, and it became our sort of lifeline during COVID, during the darkest days of COVID. So we got lots of thoughts about that show and lots of questions.
I know.
So
and
that
thank you, Brandon Young. Dr. Drew has a beautiful daughter. Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. So do I. I borned her. So, anyways, I'll go back to the commercials. But thank you, everybody. It was really fun.
Okay, thank you, guys. Good to see everybody, and we will see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna find the Hydrolite out now. But everybody, get your Hydrolite.
Keep it Hydrolite and tight.
Okay.
Anyone who's watched me over the years knows that I'm obsessed with Hydrolite. In my opinion, the best oral rehydration product on the market. I literally use it every day. My family uses it. When I had COVID, I'm telling you, Hydrolite contributed to my recovery, kept me hydrated. Now, with things finally reopening back around the country, the potential exposure to the common cold is always around. And like always, Hydrolite has got your back. Hydrolite Plus Immunity, my new favorite, starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of great ingredients. Plus, each single serving easy pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 300 milligrams of elderberry extract. Hydrolite Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy to pour sticks that rapidly dissolve in water, make a great tasting drink, has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. Uses all natural flavors, gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and even vegan. Hydrolite Plus Immunity is also now available in ready-to-drink bottles at the Walmart next to the pharmacy, or as always, you can find it by visiting hydrolite.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that is HYDRALYTE.com/DRDREW. Be sure to use the code Dr. Drew 25 for a special discount.